Welcome to episode 74 of the MMA Rundown podcast. We've got a few things to talk about this week, so we're going to be recapping the main event from UFC Vegas 9, which was Alistair Overeem versus Augusto Sakai. Overeem ended up getting the win there by TKO on the ground in the 5th round. I'll recap the rest of that card. Next thing I'll talk about, normally I go from one UFC event to the other, but we're in a bit of a weird spot here where Bellator is actually putting on much better fights in the coming week than the UFC is, so I'll actually preview the Bellator fights coming up, then I'll preview the UFC fights after that. Not a very strong card, but I'll get to it. From there, a few different things to talk about with welterweight fights that are being talked about. So for one, it's the title fights that are being discussed. So both the actual welterweight title fight and then a possible rematch for the BMF title. I'll talk about what's going on with Khamzat Chimaev, which is pretty unique in that it seems as though he's already got 2 fights lined up. One in September, and then one of them, assuming that he gets the win in September, will be lined up in October. So I'll talk about that situation. Brock Lesnar is now a free agent. I don't really think he's coming back, but I guess it's still worth mentioning that there's a possibility of it. So I'll just talk about what's going on with him, whether or not I see him coming back, and if he does come back, what would be expected out of his comeback. And then the last thing to talk about is a story that has gotten some play. I haven't really been able to look into it a ton and really see whether or not it's accurate, but it seems as though a lot of people are pushing it. Dana White's talked about it, President Trump's talked about it, Ben Askren's talked about it. But there's a wrestler from Iran named Navid Afkari who I don't know what level of championships he's won, but he actually has won some decent tournaments. But apparently he went to a protest in Iran and is going to be executed for it. So there's been an effort from some big people in the community in trying to get that execution taken off. I don't know whether the expectation is there that he'll just get kicked out of the country and be able to live somewhere else, or if they're just going to still imprison him. I don't know where they're going with that, but I'll talk about that situation as well. So back to the top, we have the main event between Augusto Sakai and Alistair Overeem. This fight mostly took place on the feet. It's interesting because Overeem, you see it a lot in his fights, and sometimes it starts when he actually does get rocked, and then he goes up against the fence and shells up, and then takes a bunch of shots, usually against smarter opponents. They'll mix some shots into the body because he usually covers up the head pretty well. But he was doing that a lot in this fight here with Sakai, even at times when he wasn't really hurt, where he would go up against the fence and give Sakai a chance to tee off on him. And Sakai was finding some openings for some body shots, but for the most part, didn't have him too badly hurt, but was definitely doing enough in the early rounds to get ahead on the judges' scorecards, you would imagine. But later on in the fight, Overeem started to actually take this fight to the ground and start using his grappling. Now, granted, the takedowns were sort of odd in how he was able to finish them, but he was able to get Sakai down. Sakai wasn't very eager to fight his way back up when he got taken down. But with that being said, he was defensive enough where Overeem was having trouble finding openings to land ground and pound. And so early on, Overeem, though he would get the takedown, really wouldn't be able to do a whole lot with it. We did even see some times when Sakai was landing some nice up kicks that looked like they were potentially hurting Overeem. But that being said, Sakai wasn't exactly attacking submissions off his back. It's not like he was fighting his way back up and then working to corner Overeem up against the fence again and really work his striking. So it was giving Overeem a chance to start gaining some momentum in later rounds. And eventually they get to the 5th round. Overeem's able to take Sakai down again. And at that point, immediately starts fighting to control the right side wrist, I believe. And then with Sakai turned away and Overeem having control of that arm, starts raining down punches. Sakai's not able to block him. Lands a few really hard ones, and I believe lands a couple elbows in there. Sakai's not improving position. He's taking hard shots. The referee says, look, you got to do something to improve position. Overeem lands a couple more shots, and then the referee steps in and ends the fight and calls it for Alistair Overeem. So for Overeem, it's a big win. He talked about before this fight how this is his final run. I believe what he means by final run is that this wasn't going to be his final fight, but that he's going to keep fighting. And if he gets knocked off and he has to reset, then he's just going to retire at that point. But if he makes it all the way to the title fight, then great. Then he'll go for the title. I don't know if the assumption is that if he actually makes it all the way to a title fight and wins the title fight, that he would keep defending it. To be honest, I don't think he's going to even make it to a title fight, let alone win a title fight. But with that being said, it seems that the plan for him is that he's just going to keep fighting until he loses again, which seems kind of odd. You kind of figure he'd want to go out on a win, but that's what he's identified, and you kind of have to take him at his word for that. So that covers it for the main event. Co-main event was a fight between Alonzo Menifield and Ovince St. Preux. This fight got pushed back a couple weeks from when it was initially supposed to happen. I was very high on OSP in this matchup. I thought that OSP was going to win this fight on the ground, though. And that's really not where most of this fight took place. It was mostly taking place on the feet. But OSP was still doing pretty well. Menifield had some moments as well, but for the most part, OSP was controlling this fight. Had outstruck Menifield prior to actually being able to knock him out. But late in the second round, Menifield tries to throw a right cross to the body, doesn't pull his hand back up. So then St. Preux stepping back, lands a short left hook and is able to knock him out cold with that. Doesn't need any follow-up punches from there, and he ends up getting the win. So for OSP, it's a pretty good one for him to beat a good up-and-comer in the light heavyweight division. He'd recently moved up to heavyweight to fight Ben Rothwell. Lost a fairly close fight there, had Rothwell hurt in the final seconds of it, but then decided to move back down to light heavyweight. And with this win here, I don't know if it's going to put him back in the rankings, but it's at least going to give him some momentum to build off of. Fight before that was a very bizarre one, but again, it's Michel Pereira, so what do you expect? Imadaev probably in a pure boxing match would have won this fight against Pereira, but Pereira, there was a lot of very bizarre shots. If you're just going to throw hands with him, it definitely makes it tougher for you. The more weapons that you can have against Pereira, the better. But it didn't seem as though Imadaev had any plan of actually grappling with him. It was mostly just going to be striking. Pereira was more diverse in his strikes. There were actually a lot of good things that Michel Pereira did in here. It wasn't that he was just like spamming a bunch of crazy attacks. There was a lot of angle changes by him. And where he would, sometimes he would just change angles just to kind of like mess around with Imadaev and not really do anything with it. Other times he would change the angle, which would set him up perfectly to line up a straight right hand, and then he'd land that right hand and hurt Imadaev. So a lot of really good stuff out of Pereira. Didn't really get to see a whole lot of grappling up until the fight ended in the end of the third round. But I guess to describe that ending, he gets behind Imadaev, sort of has like a bit of like a suplex / mat return type of takedown. Get him down, quickly sinks in a rear naked choke. Doesn't have the hooks in though. It's just squeezes him with the arms, tries to pull him back. Still kind of unclear whether or not there was a tap there. It's one of those things where it's like it was so obvious up to that point that Imadaev was not going to win that like you don't feel too bad about the ref saying that there was a tap, but it didn't exactly look like a tap. The closest thing it looked like is that he was reaching back up towards his head. Looked like he was trying to fight the hands. And as his hand went up, it like hit his forehead, but it didn't look like it was a tapping motion. It's not like there were multiple taps. It was just kind of like he brought his hand up, and the ref thought that was enough to say that there was a tap. And obviously, you don't need the hooks to be able to choke someone out with a rear naked choke. It's just that the hooks give you a whole lot more control in the position, make it a lot harder for your opponent to escape. So it's not as though Pereira didn't have a choke in there. But with that being said, it looked as though Imadaev was still defending it when the ref stepped in and called a stoppage to it. But either way, it's not as though it's really going to affect the result here. For Pereira, I think he probably gets the performance of the night anyway. But I guess that made it for sure that he got the performance of the night, so that's good for him. For Imadaev, I don't know whether or not he'll be back in the UFC because he's had a rough run in the UFC. But for Pereira, it's good. There's some talk about him potentially being a guy who can cause some trouble for some of the top guys in the division. I still don't know that I believe that. He did have that loss to Tristan Connolly, who is really a lightweight, and I don't think we've seen a whole lot of him since then. But grappling's definitely been an issue for Pereira. Guys who can grind him over time are going to be an issue. And even on the feet, if he's having to fight a guy who's not just going to limit himself just to boxing, it's definitely going to make things more tricky for him. So it's good that Pereira got the win. As I mentioned in the past, I think his role in the UFC is more as a guy who's just fun to watch and a really exciting guy to watch, but he's not really a guy who I ever see like cracking deep into the top 15 or getting to a point where people are talking about him fighting for a title. He's just a guy who's really enjoyable to watch. And anytime he's fighting, you want to be sitting in front of your TV and watching it. So for him to get a win, it solidifies the fact that he can compete at the UFC level and beat some of these guys. So it means he can stick around for a little while longer, and people are going to enjoy watching him fight. Before that, we had Andre Muniz versus Bartos Fabinski. I guess Fabinski was successful in taking down and controlling Darren Stewart in his prior fight, so he figured he could do the same with Muniz. Probably not the best idea going up against a high-level jiu-jitsu guy to assume that you're just going to stay on top of him for 15 minutes and that's going to work out in your favor. Pretty quickly, he had to fight off some submission attempts, including a guillotine, got out of that. And then from there, Muniz throws up a triangle and then quickly switches over to an armbar, sinks the wrist underneath his armpit, and then pops his hip in. So even though it was pretty close to losing the elbow on that armbar because he had such a tight grip on that wrist, and then was able to get his hips involved a lot quicker, he was able to get the tap there and get the win over Fabinski. So really big one for him. Then we had Brian Keller versus Ray Rodriguez. Rodriguez was looking to make a grappling match out of this and immediately shot in on Keller, got caught in a guillotine. It was sort of unfortunate that the way that he landed up against the fence, he would have wanted to move to his left or even like try to roll to his left and escape in the process of the roll, but the fence was in the way, so it really took away his options to escape, and Kelleher, who's got a very good guillotine to begin with, was able to get the finish there. We've got Viviarucho versus Montana De La Rosa. Montana did okay later on as the fight went on, doing better on the feet, but for the most part she was getting pushed back up against the fence and just beaten up. Her legs are getting beaten up pretty bad. Was taking some pretty heavy shots too, so Arujo gets the win here. And then the first fight on the card was Hunter Azure versus Cole Smith. Azure was able to win the early rounds with his wrestling. Smith looked pretty good towards the end, had Azure's back for much of the third round, but wasn't able to get a finish there. And as a result, Azure ends up winning 2-1 here and gets the win by decision. So that covers it for this particular fight night. Not a lot of fights on this card. Believe it was like 7 fights, and they didn't even really have like an official prelim card. It was just the whole main card. The card they got coming up next week is not going to be very big either. I'll get to that, but the next thing to get to is going to be Bellator. So Bellator has a card that's going to be coming up on September 11th. I believe that is a Friday. That will be headlined by Phil Davis versus Lyoto Machida, the rematch. So these guys initially fought in the UFC. I believe they fought in Brazil. And it was one of those rare cases where everyone would always talk about how if you fight a Brazilian in Brazil, you're going to get screwed. Like, you better really beat him badly. This was a case where a lot of people thought that Machida actually had done enough to win, but Davis got the decision in Brazil. So they're finally having a rematch now. Obviously, in this case, it's not anywhere near as significant as the first time they fought. The first time they fought, they were both high-level, or at least top contenders in the UFC light heavyweight division, and that fight had a lot of importance in terms of who's going to be next in line for a title fight, or who at least was going to be in the title picture. In this particular fight, I guess for Bellator, the winner could potentially be in the Bellator title picture, but it just doesn't feel anywhere near as significant. But still a pretty cool matchup, so it's going to be a fun fight to see. We've also got Kat Zingano on the card. I believe this is going to be her Bellator debut. She'll be fighting Gabrielle Holloway. We've got Ed Ruth returning. He'll be fighting Taylor Johnson. And then on the prelims, they've got Rafael Carvalho versus Alex Polizzi, Dominic Mazzotto versus Kevin Lee's little brother, Keith Lee. And then Leslie Smith will be fighting against Amanda Bell. I'm not entirely sure who she is, but apparently she's got a 7-6 record, so it looks like Bellator is trying to get Leslie Smith in the win column. And then the day after, also a very strong, or I guess at least compared to the UFC card, it would appear to be a very strong card, but a pretty solid card here. In the main event, they have Patrick Mix going against Juan Archuleta. I believe this is going to be a title fight. Really interesting matchup between the two here. Archuleta's got a great wrestling background. Mix typically is able to take his opponents down and is incredibly fast at taking the back, and once he gets your back, he's very good at finding the rear naked choke. So for him, it's always been a question of how is he going to be able to perform that way against guys who are much harder to take down, or against guys who are much better jiu-jitsu athletes. Archuleta is not exactly a super high-level jiu-jitsu guy, but he is a very high-level wrestler, so it'll be interesting to see if Mix is able to take him down or take his back, which is where he's been able to find a lot of success so far. If not, then we get to see a stand-up matchup between both of these guys, and they both have decent striking for guys who are primarily grapplers, so that could be fun as well. Another fun match that we have in the co-main event is going to be between John Fitch and Neiman Gracie. Fitch, we're always used to seeing him just try to take guys down and beat them up from top. Neiman Gracie, not exactly the easiest guy to do that to. That was sort of the hope heading into the Bellator welterweight tournament, that Ed Ruth, who was supposed to be a big up-and-comer from them at that point, was going to be able to do that to Neiman Gracie. That was a first-round matchup. Ed Ruth, obviously much better wrestler than John Fitch. MMA wrestling, I guess you could make some sort of arguments that maybe John Fitch has been very effective with his wrestling within MMA, but even still, Neiman Gracie was able to submit Ed Ruth. You would figure that over the course of this fight, Neiman Gracie's going to have John Fitch in some trouble too if Fitch decides to take this fight to the ground. If Fitch decides to just make this a stand-up fight, there's definitely a decent chance that he's going to have the edge there. But that would be a little different from what we usually see from Fitch. So we're either going to see Fitch forced to stand up, which is going to mean a much less boring John Fitch fight than what we're used to, or he's going to take the fight to the ground, and even still, it would probably be much less boring because Neiman Gracie's going to be attacking a lot off of his back. There's also going to be Pat Casey versus Daniel Madrid. Not sure who either of these are. Deanna Bennett versus Liz Carmouche. Carmouche, formerly a top contender in the UFC women's flyweight division, ended up losing to Valentina Shevchenko in a boring fight and then was released soon after. So I think this is going to be her first fight in Bellator. And then Deanna Bennett I'm not particularly familiar with, but again, it's still going to be an opportunity to see Carmouche, who many would have to agree is at least one of the top 10 125-pound women in the world. And then we also have Derek Campos versus Racho Huerta, which is going to be a really fun fight between a couple guys who always put on exciting fights. As for the UFC card, oh man, this is just not good. They were supposed to have a really good main event for this, to be fair to them. It's supposed to be, I believe, Thiago Santos versus Glover Teixeira. And Glover, I believe it was Glover, not Thiago. I'm pretty sure Glover tested positive for COVID a couple weeks ago. I don't know if Glover still has it right now. I guess for them it might just be one of those things where it's not really worth waiting until the final minute to figure out whether or not Glover still has COVID-19. But it does feel like there were a lot of rules that were set in place regarding COVID-19 by the commissions back when there wasn't a whole lot known about the disease, back in April. And as more information comes out, while you'll hear new information, you'll hear about the CDC adjusting their guidelines. It never really feels like the Las Vegas Commission or the Nevada Commissions are ever adjusting their guidelines. So it does seem odd that it could be over 10 days out before the fight that Glover tests positive for COVID, and we're not like, okay, well, maybe there's still a chance that he'll be fine by fight night. Why don't we still see if we can make this work? But for whatever reason, they don't feel like that's worth doing. So that fight's off the card. And so what was supposed to be the co-main event is now pushed up to the main event. That's a fight between Michelle Waterson and Angela Hill. I guess they're both ranked, but I don't really expect this fight to be very good. Waterson probably, if this fight goes to the ground, you should figure that Waterson has the edge there, but I don't know that I see her really fighting to get it there or being super successful at doing so. On the feet, Hill's probably going to land more volume. Waterson occasionally lands some big shots on the feet, and at other times she'll just throw strikes that would have absolutely no chance of landing. It's just some really bizarre stuff. There's always some funny pictures from Michelle Waterson fights where she'll be throwing like a front kick, and her opponent will be like 6 feet away and just kind of looking at her like, what the hell are you doing? So I'm sure there'll be some of that as well, but I think there's a decent chance that Angela Hill's going to win a decision here, and it's not going to be a very exciting fight in the process. On the co-main event, we have Otto Zaitar versus Kamaru, which could be a curtain jerker on any pay-per-view card, but this is going to be a co-main event here. Kamaru's actually put on some good performances. I believe he's 2-0 in the UFC so far. I believe in both cases he was the underdog and was able to find a way to get the win. And then Zaitar is 12-0, so it should be a tough matchup for Worthy. We've got actually a decent fight that I would argue is probably more worthy of the co-main event spot, or more worthy of the main event spot than the actual main event, which is Roxanne Modafferi and Andrea Lee. Both these girls are up for weight class at 125 versus the main event being at 115. The rankings are fairly similar, although I think this fight actually has higher ranked girls. But Andrea Lee versus Modafferi should be a decent fight. Not the biggest fan of Modafferi. Her striking isn't always all that good. The grappling, I guess, she finally, after like 20 years, finally got her black belt. But when you watch her fight, it seems as though there's a lot of mistakes that she makes. Andrea Lee is a pretty solid grappler, so if Modafferi is able to take this fight to the ground, I don't think that she's going to be super dominant. But on the feet, Andrea Lee should definitely have the edge here, so I think that Andrea Lee, assuming this fight doesn't get too close and go to the judges, I think Andrea Lee should be able to get the win here. Ed Herman versus Mike Rodriguez should be a pretty fun fight. Rodriguez is coming off of a pretty recent knockout win. I think there's a decent chance he'll be able to do the same again here against Ed Herman. And then we have Billy Quarantillo versus Kyle Nelson. And Quarantillo, fairly new guy in the UFC, but pretty solid all around. I believe he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu, really good on the ground, solid on the feet as well. Nelson I don't know as much about, so it's tough for me to break the fight down. So that covers it for that. I guess the good news for the UFC is that even though this card is going to suck, the card coming right after is going to have a very, very good main event. I kind of wish that they had done some more promotion leading into it. I think that it's a fight that should probably be on a pay-per-view for them, but instead it's just going to be on an ESPN card. But they're going to have Tyron Woodley versus Colby Covington, and I'm sure there will be plenty of stuff that comes up throughout this week as we get closer to that fight, and then hopefully the week ahead there's going to be a lot more excitement around it, and a lot of people are going to tune in because it's really a great matchup just from a style matchup, just if you're only interested in what goes on inside the cage. But beyond that, there's a great storyline behind the two of them as well. So there's at least that to look forward to. But as far as the UFC goes, they're definitely outgunned by Bellator this week, I would say. So on to the next topic is some welterweight fights that are coming up for the UFC. So I did mention Colby versus Woodley. The winner there probably isn't going to get an immediate title shot. Reason being that the actual title shot that's coming up is going to be coming up in December, and it's not as though Kamaru Usman's a guy who fights every 3 months or every 4 months anyway. But he should be fighting in December, I believe December 12th against Gilbert Burns. That was initially who he was supposed to fight in July. Burns got COVID-19, so he had to get taken off the card. But it looks like he's going to keep that title fight. A side note for Gilbert Burns, that it seems as though this is going under the radar. One of the really cool things about him is that he's never really been too shy about also competing in grappling at the same time that he's competing at the high level, or at a high level in the UFC. And he just took a match for that October card I was talking about last week with Nicky Ryan and Tony Ramos and Gordon Ryan and Mateus Diniz. He's going to be going up against Dante Leon on that card in October, and this is all while he's the number one contender in the UFC. As far as that goes, I think outside of Ben Henderson, who I believe was doing some jiu-jitsu competitions while he was a UFC champion, Gilbert Burns has to be one of the highest ranked guys in the UFC who, at the same time of being like a top contender, is also willingly taking grappling matches against guys who are very difficult opponents. We were seeing Ben Henderson compete like at the world championship level and getting beaten by some of the top guys there, and even competing at ADCC, and in some cases getting some pretty rough matchups. I believe he had a match with Rodolfo Vieira, for example, when he's in the absolute division. But that aside, for Gilbert Burns, I definitely respect the fact that he has a title fight that's being lined up against Kamaru Usman, and he's willingly taking a match against Dante Leon. Now, as far as Dante Leon, if you're not familiar with him, he competed at ADCC in 2019, pulled off a really big upset in the quarterfinals, beating Lucas Lepri. was able to take his back and win on points in that match. So then got to the semifinals and lost to Wagner Rocha on points, and then in the third place match went against Gary Tonin and then was submitted by Gary Tonin by heel hook. So fourth place in ADCC, which is absolutely nothing to scoff at, very high level. And then right after ADCC, the No-Gi Worlds for IBJJF took place. Now, as I mentioned, the No-Gi Worlds, it definitely means something if you win them, but they're not at the same level as ADCC. Winning an ADCC title means a lot more than winning an IBJJF Black Belt No-Gi World title. But with that being said, it's still a big deal to win that title. And Dante Leon actually did go ahead and win that title. So he's a 2019 No-Gi World Champion. As far as his game, with him being a Black Belt World Champion, obviously he's very good all around. But where he definitely finds the most success is in attacking the back and being able to get to people's backs and then choke them from the back. So you'd imagine that's what he's going to be looking for against Gilbert Burns. Burns is probably going to be able to get top position in this match. So Dante's going to be looking to hunt the back from there, and then if he's able to get Gilbert's back, it's more likely that he's going to be going for a choke than like any kind of joint lock where he could potentially cause a serious injury that would take Burns out of his match against Kamaru Usman. So stylistically, not the worst type of match to take, but with that being said, it's still a very difficult opponent and a very dangerous opponent, with that being said, so you got to respect Gilbert Burns for taking that match. As for the other fight that is being talked about for the UFC welterweight division, we have a likely rematch between Nate Diaz and Jorge Masvidal for the BMF title. This fight doesn't make a ton of sense, I would say, in that if Masvidal is still to be considered one of the top contenders, it would make sense to put him up against another top contender, a guy like Leon Edwards, for example. For him to fight Nate Diaz, it seems as though the idea there is that they're just trying to put together a money fight, that Nate Diaz isn't willing to fight anyone other than pretty much Masvidal or McGregor. So in this case, McGregor wouldn't be the worst fight that you can make right now, but it seems as though McGregor is looking more at the title than he is at Nate Diaz right now. So I guess you can get Nate Diaz back out there and make a lot of money off of him. For Masvidal, he had a lot of hype going into that fight against Kamaru Usman. Didn't have the best showing there, so if you put him up against a guy, Nate Diaz, who he thoroughly beaten, or was thoroughly beating before the cut ended up stopping the fight, then the hope there would be that you have a fight a lot of people are going to watch. You're going to have a lot of people who are still high on Masvidal. They're going to see him do really well in the rematch against Nate Diaz, and then they're going to kind of have him back in that same situation that he was in before he fought Usman, where everyone's high on him again and thinks that he's a guy who can be a future champion. So I guess I can see it from that standpoint, but if you're looking at the rankings, I don't know if this fight makes the most sense right now, especially given the fact that Masvidal was so dominant in that first fight. Next welterweight to talk about, in terms of fights that are being talked about, is Khamzat Chimaev. Very interesting that he has a couple fights that are being lined up for him within like a month of each other too. So the first fight that I believe is now signed on September 19th is going to be him versus Gerald Meerschaert. And the idea is that if he's able to get the win over Gerald Meerschaert, then he's going to move on and fight Damian Maia next. I guess I'll break down each individual matchup first before I get to the talk of him fighting Maia. But it is kind of funny, as I mentioned before, that a very high likelihood for his next matches were going to be him against some high-level jiu-jitsu guys, and that the UFC is like, okay, well, this guy is taking guys down and just killing them on the ground. Either we're going to put him up against a high-level jiu-jitsu guy and he's going to be forced to stand up and we're going to see some more of his striking, or we're going to put him against a high-level jiu-jitsu guy and then he's going to be able to sort of play his game against a high-level jiu-jitsu guy, at which point you're like, okay, well, if he can do it against this guy, then shit, he can do it against pretty much everyone. So for Meerschaert is a black belt. It's not that Meerschaert's like the highest level jiu-jitsu guy in the division, but he's going to be tough on the ground. It's not a guy who you'd expect to see just get run through on the mat. Pretty solid striking as well, so if Meerschaert does give Chimaev trouble on the mat, then there's the possibility that they're going to have to strike, and at that point, Meerschaert, being able to outstrike Meerschaert does kind of mean something. Meerschaert is coming off of a recent win against Deron Winn, a guy who has a very high-level wrestling background. Now, granted, Deron Winn's mat grappling is nowhere near the same level as Kamza Chimaev is, but the idea there is like, hey, this is a guy coming off a win over Deron, so maybe if he can win a matchup like that, then he's going to make a fight with Chimaev a very difficult fight for Khamzat, and if Khamzat's able to get the win, then you could be like, well, we just saw Deron Winn lose to Gerald Meerschaert. Now Khamzat Chimaev came in and beat Gerald Meerschaert. This kind of gives us some context to where he's at. And if he does get that win, then you have the fight with Damian Maia. Now for Maia, it's kind of unfortunate in that you were hoping that he was going to get a fight with a guy like Diego Sanchez or someone where he can kind of sort of get a bit of an easier win for him and then move on and be able to retire. If he gets a win over Khamzat Chimaev, it's one of those things where it's like, even if Chimaev is coming off of a win over Meerschaert, people might not appreciate the win as much, or it might take some time for Chimaev to work his way back up in the division before people appreciate the win. But the idea really seems to be that it would be a ranked win for Chimaev. It would be a big name for Chimaev, and he could really build himself off of it. So it seems as though it's they're definitely not trying to do Damian Maia any favors with that matchup. It's definitely trying to do Khamzat Chimaev some favors with that matchup. As far as how it would actually go, I don't think that Chimaev's going to want to actually take that fight to the ground and try to beat up Damian Maia down there. We have seen some matchups where you have high-level grapplers, maybe not exactly to the level of Damian Maia, but at that ADCC level where they fight against high-level wrestlers. And it seems like in most cases, whether it's like Islam Makhachev versus Davi Ramos, I guess Arman Saryukin versus Davi Ramos to an extent, although Saryukin did take him down a couple times and was just fairly careful when he went down there. But for the most part, when you have these matchups, the guy who usually wrestles guys down and beats them out on the ground typically tries to stay on the feet. So I'd imagine we'd get the same type of thing here from Chimaev, where Chimaev would not really be trying to take Damian Maia down all that often, or if he does, it might just be for brief moments and just being very careful when he actually goes down there. And then on the feet, that's where it gets a little bit trickier. So the assumption would probably be that Chimaev would have the advantage over Damian Maia in the feet. If Maia is just pressing forward and looking to force takedowns on Chimaev, who's to say he can't take him down? I don't exactly know what Chimaev's defensive wrestling skills are at. I know offensively he's very skilled. Defensively, is he going to be able to stuff Damian Maia's single leg takedown if Maia's able to force his way in up against the fence? I don't know exactly. So that'd be something interesting to see. If Maia does get Chimaev down and Maia gets top position on Chimaev, that's going to be a very big advantage for Damian Maia. As far as what I've seen from Chimaev so far, I have watched some of his older fights on the feet. Technically speaking, it's not the most impressive thing out there. There was a fight that he won by knockout. I think he actually knocked the guy out with a jab, which the actual highlight of it was pretty nice. But within the fight, he was definitely leaving some openings. He was definitely leaving his hands down at times. Wasn't the slickest striking out there, but again, it was effective enough. But the guy he was fighting, I believe, was a sambo guy, not a striker, and was actually giving Chimaev a lot of trouble. Chimaev had a lot of failed takedown attempts before he was eventually able to land a heavy shot on him and knock him down. So if Chimaev stays on the feet for a long period of time, it might expose that. To most UFC fans, I think they would think of his striking as sort of like this mystery, but apparently we hear from the gym that it's good, therefore he must be a very high-level striker as well. I don't know that I'd really say that based off what I've seen from him so far, so it might kind of give some people an idea of where his striking really lands. Now, that being said, no one's under the impression that Khabib Nurmagomedov's an elite striker. With that being said, he's still arguably the number one pound-for-pound guy right now, so it's not as though he needs to show elite striking for people to respect him or view him as a top guy. But it is something that we might get to see more of if he's not willing to go in there and immediately take Damian Maia down and try to control him for 15 or 25 minutes on the ground. So if that matchup gets put together in October, it's definitely one I want to see, especially if Chimaev is able to get a dominant win over Gerald Meerschaert. So it's definitely going to be something to look forward to moving forward. And it's cool that he's in this rare spot where the UFC is already lining up 2 fights ahead for him rather than just the next fight. Next thing to talk about is going to be Brock Lesnar. He is now a free agent. I don't really think that he's going to be coming back to the UFC. If he does come back to the UFC, he's going to have to get put back into the drug testing pool, and I'm sure they're going to have to be a lot more strict about it, given that the last time they did this and they weren't strict about it, he tested positive and made them look bad. You don't want another Mark Hunt to come along and have to fight against Brock Lesnar and then put forth a lawsuit and be able to say, hey, look, we saw what happened last time with Mark Hunt. They did it again. He tested positive again. I think at that point the UFC would be in trouble, so they definitely have to be careful with that. As far as matchups for him go, I don't really think there's a good matchup for Brock Lesnar. If you put him up in there against a guy who is a top contender and he loses, well, then I guess it's good for the top contender, but then what's really in it for Brock? If you put him up against someone who's really not that big of a name in the division yet and he gets a win, well, does that mean that Brock has to stick around and then fight a top contender afterwards? You're pretty much just knocking down another guy because Brock Lesnar is a guy who you would have to imagine isn't going to take more than like 1 or 2 fights with the UFC. It's not like he's going to sign with the UFC, be a top contender, win the title, and then defend the title for like 5 fights straight. Like, that's just not an expectation here. The idea with Lesnar is he's going to come into the octagon, he's going to take like 1 or 2 fights, he's going to bring his big name with him, and then hopefully if you're the UFC, a younger guy in the division is going to be able to beat him and sort of take some of that shine off of him. So for them, if you put him up against a top contender, it's like, does Brock even want that? Like, I think if Brock's going to come back in the UFC, for one, he's going to want a lot of money and possibly more money than what he's able to generate at this point in his career, which is going to be worth looking into for the UFC. But then on top of that, he's probably going to want a fight that's a lot more manageable for him and one that he can probably win. And if you're putting him against a top contender, maybe he's not even willing to take that type of a fight. So for them, it's going to be tough because you have to be able to offer him enough money where he actually wants to come back. On top of the money, you're going to have to be able to offer him a fight that he's actually willing to take. And I don't know if there's going to be the right mix there for him. So I think at this point, it'll be fun for him to have a lot of fans talk about it and to sort of gauge the interest there, but I just don't really see him coming back at this point in his life. And even if he does, I just don't know that he's going to do much more than take a fight with sort of like a middle name, sort of like Mark Hunter, I believe, was like number 8 or 9 in the division at the time. Competitive, at least within the competitive architecture, it's not as though it's going to mean a whole lot. But I guess for people who just want to see Brock Lesnar fight, they'll get that. So it'd be good for casual fans. Now, one thing to mention is that a lot of people are just crapping on the idea of Brock Lesnar coming back. To give Brock Lesnar his due, he actually was a UFC champion. I know a lot of people don't like it because he came from WWE, but this is a guy who was a Division I national champion. For whatever it's worth, if the day that Brock Lesnar rejoins the UFC heavyweight division, Brock Lesnar, especially now that Daniel Cormier is gone, is going to have the best pedigree, have the best wrestling pedigree of anyone within that division. I think right now it would be, you could either argue Stipe Miocic being a Division I wrestler or Curtis Blades being a junior college national champion, that they have the highest wrestling pedigree in the division. But you put Brock Lesnar in there as a Division I national champion, he would have the highest pedigree in wrestling, and that's something that's definitely important in MMA, still to this day in 2020. So you still have to give him respect. You still have to understand he does have ways to win fights against some of the top guys, even if he fights a guy like Ngannou. You'd imagine that he doesn't want to go anywhere near him and even like get close enough to shoot, but if he does shoot and he does get Ngannou down, that does make for some interesting moments if he's able to keep him down at that. So do I think that Lesnar is going to fight Ngannou? No. Do I think that he would beat Ngannou? No. But he has done enough in his combat sports career to at least warrant the respect of someone who belongs in the UFC and of someone who even has paths to victory against some of the best guys in the division. So that covers it for Brock Lesnar. Last thing to talk about is going to be Navid Afkari. Kind of got to the main point in the preview, pretty much just saying what the situation here is that there was a champion wrestler from Iran who went to a anti-government protest in Iran. In the U.S., if you protest, they let you because it's something you're free to do, especially if you're being peaceful about it and you're not causing damage. In certain parts of the U.S., you can also cause damage, and the DA, assuming that you are on the same side as them, will let you out and let you out scot-free. And then if you want to go back out and then murder someone again, you kind of get afforded that. Granted, if you do go out and murder someone, then you're probably going to be in trouble for that, but that's just me sort of making a slide reference to something that happened in Portland where a guy was shot in the street by someone who had previously been arrested in a prior protest, but wasn't charged. But with that being said, it sounds like for Afkari, and again, this is all assuming that what I've read online is real. I haven't seen videos of it or really done a ton of research in it, but assuming that everything that's been said has been correct, he just went to an anti-government but a peaceful protest, and as a result, he is not just going to jail, but he's going to be executed for it. So a lot of people in the wrestling community shared that story and were saying, hey, look, we need to bring awareness to this and see if there's any way we can stop it. We had Dana White put up a video about it saying that he would like the same to happen. President Trump tweeted about it. Now, that being said, I don't even know that President Trump tweeting about it was necessarily the best thing. I don't think that either way that this is going to be stopped. I think Iran is going to execute him regardless. But President Trump and Iran don't have a great relationship, so if Trump wants to see them not execute this guy, maybe that gives them the reason to execute it. Maybe they decide not to execute him and then sort of use that as leverage moving forward. That's another possibility, but that's just a story that's been going around, so I figured it'd be worth mentioning. Protesting isn't something that should ever really put you in jail, but if it does, it should be an incredibly short time at all, but definitely not to the point where you're being penalized with death. And for that to happen to him, where he's going to be penalized with death for going to a protest, that just is way over the top and kind of shows where they're at in Iran. And obviously, there's a lot of work to do in that country in terms of making things a lot better and offering more freedom to the people who live there. So that covers it for this week. As I mentioned, next week I'll be recapping the Bellator events. I'll be recapping whatever is left of the UFC event. But then the big thing to talk about then will be previewing the Colby Covington versus Tyron Woodley fight. And if any other big news comes out in the meantime, I'll be talking about that as well.